Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry that I can't be with you in person. I did get a negative test this morning, which is the good news. The bad news is that I am not feeling all that well, and I didn't think it was worth breathing on anybody. So I am trying something a little different. It's out of love for the community. It's just not worth getting anyone sick. We are in a series called Old Words for a New Way. And last week we talked about words of life. And this week I want to talk about words of love. If you are in the sanctuary, there are little yellow sermon outlines on the end of every row and sometimes in the middle. If you wanted to follow along with that, you are certainly free to do so. If you are a note taker or want to know sort of where we are in the process. I also just wanted to take a moment to thank the staff, both Brenda and Abby, for stepping up this morning in my absence, and also for Helen for being the liturgist, for Sharon for being on tech, and then in a moment you will see Karen and Jenny for leading the discussion. So I want to thank everybody for stepping up, and I know that you're in good hands this morning. Our scripture comes from 1 John 4, 7 and 8, a famous passage, and it sounds like this. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. The one who does not love God does not know God, for God is love. God is love. Just an amazingly powerful encouragement, exhortation from John, and it's going to launch us into a little bit of a conversation this morning. I want to introduce something to you. I'm going to put up on the screen, if you just Google Greek words for love, because the New Testament, the Christian New Testament, was written in Greek. And if you Google Greek words for love, there are going to be 7 of them usually that come up. Sometimes there's only 6, but there are 7 Greek words that all get translated into English as love. And there's something for me a little concerning about that. Not because I'm like an originalist or like I want to go back and reclaim something or anything like that. It's just that when everything, all the texture and goodness of life gets sanded down and sort of made mono and it all becomes just love, I think that we are impoverished in our understanding and experience of love because everything is just sort of melted into one another, blended into one another, and we lose the richness and variation of, it's just lost in time and in translation. So I thought it would be good for us to just stop for a moment and pull us apart a little bit and see if there's anything in there for us. I've been telling you that in this series we're going to go into the church basement. We're into the attic of church history. We're going to dust some stuff off and we're going to bring it out and see if it has any value for us and if we want to use it or if it's going to go into storage in the garage, sort of thing. So there are 7 Greek words for love, but only 4 of those made it into the Bible. Only 4 were used in the Christian New Testament. And I think that those 4 are telling. They're illustrative. They illustrate something. So the first is phileo or philia. We get it in Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. This is love of neighbor. Okay? And so that's a very common sort of understanding of love, is love of neighbor. Then there's storge, which is the love of family or love of kindred. And so that is probably in our time and place, that's the most familiar, no pun intended, version of the love that we know and understand is familial love, storge, love of family. Then there's eros, where we get erotic from, but it's more than erotic. It's romantic love. It's also complemented with like a flirty or a fun love. And so Eros is an important part of our web of meaning in life. Just like love of neighbor, just like love of family, love of the romantic love, Eros, is an important part of the mix. And then finally, the last of the Greek words that came into the New Testament is agape. And it's interesting because of the 7 Greek words, agape is probably the least used outside the New Testament. But in the New Testament, there's something that the New Testament writers really valued about this love, which is love in its highest form, of the most virtue, of the most refined nature. And so that is known as the divine love or the love of God. Not so here's where it's really tricky. It's not that we love God, it's the love from God or of God. And that love transforms us and it informs us, it reforms us, and it forms our loves. So agape for the Christian, as we are mapping out sort of our web of life and faith and meaning and relationship and community connection, we have this 4th anchor that becomes really, really important and actually impacts the other 3, that philia, our love of neighbor, storge, our love of kindred or family, eros, our romantic love, and agape not only work together in sort of a web of goodness connection, but that agape is the highest form. And I want to talk about why that's important in a minute. So, of those 4 loves, it's interesting to ask the question, are all 4 needed for a well-rounded or complete sort of nourishing wholeness, goodness? If you think about it like a meal, are all 4 ingredients required? And you could make a really strong case that we benefit when we have all 4. It's like a 4-course meal, right? Like you have the salad that comes first, that's really good. You have the meat and potatoes. You have the dessert, right? Or vegetables. You got to mix in vegetables. The meal is more well-rounded and our diet's more balanced when we have all these. Well, so is our human experience when we have all 4 of these types of love in our life. When we have love of neighbor, when we have love of kindred, when we have a romantic love or a playful love, and when we have a divine connection to community by which we receive love and we give love, it informs our other loves. So we are more well-rounded. Why do I bring this up? You may say, Pastor Bo, this is so obvious. Why spend time on this? Here's the reason. In late Western society that we live in, 21st century America, we live in a consumer society. And this consumer society has sort of gone into I want to call it like a reactive sort of mode where it's on the defensive, right? We just celebrated an anniversary of an attack on America 20 years ago that changed our country and our society and our relationship to the rest of the world. And so both inside our borders and outside our borders, we have gone into this sort of defensive posture, and that we're always looking for the enemy without and the enemy within. And inside that consumer society, what has happened is that people have really trumpeted, whether it's love of neighbor, right? Like after something bad happens, you'll take the name of that town and you'll say, something strong, right? That we rebuild as a community. And that's fantastic, right? And then you have Storge and this love of family. And the family has become elevated or reified to a degree that we talked about it this summer in Chosen Family. If you weren't here for that, go find that video. That Chosen Family, we talked about how there's this romanticization of the nuclear family in a way that may be getting a little unhealthy. And then you have erotic love, and of course, we live in this hyper sexualized culture where it's not just sexual liberation, right, which came with some benefits, but like it might have become an untethered sort of Frankenstein that has taken on a life of its own and is no longer compatible with, you know, the larger picture that we want to paint. And so in this consumer society, people can claim to have love of neighbor, love of family, and erotic love, but without agape, the divine love that orders the rest of our loves, all of those things become a consumer commodity that the more we partake of them, we consume them, but in the end, we become consumed. We get consumed by those things. And that's one of the dangers of not having a wholeness perspective and a web of relationship. When we are missing one of them, or one of them is disproportionately operating in our life, there's an unhealth that can creep in. And for us in a consumer society, it's in danger of consuming us, that we are less than we could be or that we desire to be, because we have either overemphasized one or neglected one, and that our web is deficient because we have not brought it into wholeness and allowed them to mutually edify and inform one another. I know lots of people who would thump their chest and say, I love my family, and I love my neighbor, and right, and I love my wife or whatever. And you think, yeah, okay. It seems a little out of balance, or there's something a little off with it, because here's the problem. It puts you at the center. And when the divine love is not part of the matrix, and it puts you at the center, there's something a little off, because Jesus said, if you only love those who love you, what have you done? Everyone does that. You know who does that? Lawyers. Those are hypocrites. English teachers, nurses, firefighters. Everyone does that. You've done nothing more than anyone else. Everyone loves those who love them. That's easy. It's when this agape love calls us to a higher love and rightly orders our other loves. Then we're doing something that Jesus called us to, a higher standard. Last thing I want to say is, does the order matter? Well, I think it does. I want to put an asterisk there, because I think in different seasons of life, different of these four loves, these four priorities can take priority. And I think that's healthy and fine. But if we get stuck in a place where, say, family, like when you have little kids, like you got to focus on the little kids, it's fine, right? But as they grow, it's good for them to see you as parents focus on community, right? And to have a relationship with the divine. And, right, to model that, to not neglect the romantic, so that it models for them healthy wholeness and goodness in a relational web. If you continue to focus on children like you did when they were infants, and they are the center of your world and everything revolves around them, eventually it becomes a dysfunction, right? And you could do this for all of the loves. So at different points in our life, it is good for us to have different priorities, but by balancing these four in the different seasons of life, we actually have a fuller experience of being human and of being in community, and to model and mirror for one another what it looks like to be healthy in different seasons of life. So, this is a conversation I would love to have with you. I want to thank you for listening in, and I would love to hear your thoughts. Sorry again that I can't be with you there today. I would love to hear what's about to happen. I love you.